Throughout the story of Invincible, Mark Grayson goes through many phases and forms, getting stronger and stronger each time in order to defeat increasingly powerful enemies and save his loved ones. But did you ever wonder how strong he actually gets by the end of the series? Does he finally manage to surpass 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝗄𝗏 warriors, Omniman, Frag, and become the strongest warrior in the universe? There are a total of 13 incredible forms we'll cover in this video, and let's begin where it all started. Human Mark. The first issue of Invincible introduces us to Mark Grayson. He's your typical average teenager, but with a twist. His father is actually an alien from a race called 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝗄𝗏, and Mark's inherited all of his abilities, even though they haven't quite kicked in yet. Mark was pretty desperate to get his powers in order to team up with his father, who's Earth's strongest hero, and fight crime as a duo. Superhero Mark. At the start of his superhero career, Mark was just an average crime fighter who even made his own suit. In this form, he's able to fly, use super strength to neutralize enemies, and on top of all that, he also has super speed. Mark was trying to make a name for himself, but one day his father Omniman spotted him during one of his runs and decided to take him to his personal tailor. What followed was the eventual birth of the greatest hero Earth will ever see. But not yet, there's still a lot to cover until we get to that part. Anyway, one day at school, Mark threatened to bully, which led to the principal warning him that he wasn't invincible or anything like that. And oh, how wrong he was. It's at this point that Mark picked the word invincible and made it his alter ego. Sometime later, while busting a couple of goons robbing a bank, Mark showed off his new suit in spectacular style, somewhat mirroring the iconic cover page featuring the first appearance of Superman. The Invincible. Ever since he became a hero, Mark's confidence was over the moon. Also, according to his dad, 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝗄𝗏 get stronger over time, so by the time Earth gets invaded by another alien race, Mark's well equipped to hold his own despite only having his powers for 4 months. By now, he's an active contributor to the Team, a group of teenage superheroes who took him in soon after he started fighting crime. In this form, Mark can fly all the way to the moon, but can't really breathe that long in space. Oh, also, he's fast enough to fly from America to Antarctica within 50 seconds. Despite how young he is, Mark shows signs of wisdom and prefers to communicate with his foes in order to deduce their motivations, unlike his punch-happy father. For example, he decided to talk to Alan instead of just attacking him for no reason, and he'd later go on to form a deep bond with him. By the end of this arc, Mark foiled a heist orchestrated by one of the 𝗕𝗲𝗏 twins, fought off an alien invasion by beings from another dimension, and stopped a deranged teacher from making living bombs out of college students. Not bad for a rookie. However, although that's already pretty impressive, these feats are nothing compared to what he'll be able to do soon. First year in college Mark. Although Mark's gotten much stronger since becoming a superhero, he still needs the team to have his back in case he gets swarmed by powerful foes like members of the Lizard League. He's nowhere near as strong as his father Omniman, and eventually gets destroyed as soon as he stands up to him upon realizing how his dad brutally murdered an entire team of superheroes. During their fight, Mark gets punched through cities, flung across continents, and collides with a train full of people, yet still manages to get back up and continue fighting. In the end, despite all of his efforts, Mark is left to rot in a puddle of his own blood while his dad leaves the Earth. This is the first time Mark's durability is put to the real test, and although he lost the battle, merely surviving Omniman's relentless attacks is something not many heroes could do. Government Officer Mark. In a span of approximately 3 weeks, Mark gets a new job working for the government's Global Defense Agency. He's also able to punch Alan so hard now that the alien actually feels it and compliments Mark. Also, Mark can spend a lot more time in space without needing to breathe. He's able to hold his own against an entire army of enemies on a foreign planet and has pretty much dealt with 3 alien invasions at this point. As powerful as Mark is right now, he can still get hurt and even suffers a black eye from Thomas Winters. While investigating a power grab orchestrated by the villain Machine Head, Mark came across a team of foes with considerable power backing them up. Despite holding his own fairly well against them, Mark and the new Guardians of the Globe were absolutely destroyed by Battle Beast without him even breaking a sweat. Battle Beast is an impressive warrior who thirsts for a good fight, and he's capable of pummeling Mark much like Omniman did several months ago. And although Mark was humiliated by Battle Beast, don't let this fool you, as he's now much stronger than he ever was. His endurance is much better as well, shown when he was able to survive a near nuclear explosion during his battle against an army of 𝗕𝗲𝗏 twins. By the end of this arc, Mark's ability to dispatch foes is unmatched by anyone else around him, and his biggest challenges are juggling his interpersonal relationships and worrying about his tailoring fees. 8 more forms left to cover, and let's continue with Intergalactic Mark. One day out of the blue, Mark is gets approached by an alien asking him to save a planet called 𝗕𝗲𝗃, which will soon be destroyed by some kind of cosmic threat. Mark accepts and travels to 𝗕𝗃𝗃, but soon realizes that he was tricked. It was all orchestrated by his father in order for the two to meet. At this point, Nolan, Mark's father, is a 𝗕𝗲𝗃𝗏 outlaw after abandoning his duties on Earth and is now chased by other 𝗕𝗲𝗃mites. Soon, 3 high-level 𝗕𝗲𝗃mite warriors come to attack them, and Mark needs to instantly decide what he's going to do. He decides to stay and help his father. Although they eventually lost and Nolan was captured, Mark successfully managed to battle against and harm 𝗕𝗲𝗃mites who are far older and much more experienced than him. The battle was exceptionally gruesome, and Mark suffered a significant amount of injuries during their skirmish. Surprisingly enough, the only reason Mark survived is that he was deemed worthy of being called a fellow 𝗕𝗲𝗃mite warrior by his father's assailants. Thus, he had his wounds treated and he was offered an ultimatum: take over Earth within the next 100 years or get executed. Oh yeah, also, while staying on 𝗕𝗃𝗃, Mark's dad actually had a child with one of the aliens, named Oliver. And now that he's been captured, Mark takes Oliver back with him to Earth. Unfortunately for Mark, soon after returning, 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐬 takes his mom and Oliver hostage. Mark gets flung through several dimensions by 𝐬𝐬, and after getting saved by an alternate reality version of the Guardians of the Globe, he finds his way back to his own dimension and defeats 𝗂𝐮𝐬𝐬 in a rather graphic fashion. In the time that follows, Mark successfully stops the cyborg zombie project and liberates Martians from an army of parasites. Pretty standard stuff. However, soon after, another 𝗕𝗲𝗃mite, Anissa, comes to Earth to check on Mark's progress. And although it wasn't the most serious fight, it was clear that Mark still wasn't as strong as a regular 𝗕𝗲𝗃mite warrior and had a long way to go if he wanted to save his planet. Mark's durability is put to the test yet again, but this time against the Lovecraftian warriors of the world beneath the Earth. 𝐷𝗲𝐿, a villain from before, makes his comeback and effectively abducts almost every superhero on Earth with his army of monstrous beings. Invincible struggles for the most part and even winds up passing out from his injuries during the encounter. The battle eventually ends with Darkwing saving everyone. However, Mark is furious about this as Darkwing should be in prison for murdering many criminals in Midnight City. It's due to this that Mark contemplates resigning from his job with the Global Defense Agency, as he doesn't like how they handle stuff. However, when he goes to confront his superior, 𝐶𝐶L, about it, he discovers that yet another criminal from before, Sinclair, is also on 𝐶𝐶L's payroll, which further infuriates Mark. 𝐶𝐶L throws Mark into a room full of cyborg zombies, but he's able to defend himself easily. However, Mark will soon realize that he's not as invincible as he thought. 𝐶𝐶L reveals to Mark that they implanted some kind of device into his ear which emits a specific frequency that causes incredible pain to 𝗕𝗲𝗃mites and also makes them lose balance. This leaves Mark completely incapacitated, but he manages to somehow fly away and reach the Guardians of the Globe, who help him deactivate the frequency device. After that, 𝐶𝐶L says that he doesn't care what anyone thinks of him, and he'll continue working with criminals if that's what's best for the planet. He then proceeds to fire Mark, who in turn threatens 𝐶𝐶L never to come close to him or his family ever again. Solo hero Mark. After leaving the Global Defense Alliance, Invincible decides to fight crime on his own with his little brother. After getting Oliver his first hero costume, Mark decides that he needs a new look too. And yeah, he looks even more badass now. During another brief stint with the Muller twins, who simply refuse to learn their lesson time and time again, Oliver decides to blur the lines between good and evil and swiftly executes both of the twins. All of this takes place on land, while Mark somehow takes a nuclear explosion in space. Upon his return, finding out what transpired leads to a disagreement between Mark and Oliver, which slowly causes a rift to form between the two. Lost and confused about his place in the world, the only solace Mark would find for now is by confiding in 𝗕𝗏𝗏 and pursuing a fulfilling relationship with her. They wind up dating a lot more often, and Mark continues doing hero work as usual, helping a couple of heroes from the future and thwarting the plans of a misguided vigilante. However, he soon notices that someone's been keeping an eye on him and his family. Invincible soon finds out that the person who's been monitoring him is none other than Levi 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏, who somehow survived their previous encounter and now leads an army of evil Marks from other realities. The army goes on to wipe out every major nation on Earth, despite facing ample opposition from every superhero on the planet. By the end of it all, an incapacitated Mark is left tending to 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏's wounds while the world continues to burn around him and the heroes continue to fall one by one. After his doppelgangers get sent to a pocket dimension by Levi, Mark, alongside Oliver, confronts his old nemesis and eventually makes up his mind about killing in the name of justice. However, before delivering the final blow, Levi slips away once again. As if taking on an army of his doppelgangers wasn't bad enough, Mark soon finds himself face to face against an even more terrifying enemy, one of the strongest 𝗕𝗲𝗃mites in the universe, conquest. After everything he's been through up to this point, is Mark finally strong enough to take on someone like this? Just like 𝗕𝗲, Conquest has come to see how Mark is progressing with taking over the Earth, which he obviously doesn't plan to do. However, unlike 𝗕𝗲, who was pretty easy on Mark, Conquest is pretty much just looking for a reason to beat him up. This battle is pretty much one-sided, with Mark and Oliver getting the beating of a lifetime dished out to them. After some battling, 𝗕𝗲 comes to help them, and together they manage to somehow defeat Conquest, with Mark completely pummeling his face. A panel that I definitely can't show here. When you look at how weak Mark was at the beginning of this video, his transformation so far already seems impressive, but there's still 6 more forms left to cover, and trust me, he'll get much more powerful than this. 𝗕𝗲 Warmark. After dealing with interdimensional aliens who age really fast, Mark gets back home, but to his surprise, he finds out that his dad Nolan came back to visit the family. It's revealed that Nolan escaped his execution after befriending Alan, and together they joined forces in order to fight against 𝗕𝗲mites. Omniman eventually recruits both of his sons in order to amp up the Coalition of Planets Forces, which is an organization dedicated to stopping the 𝗕𝗲mite Empire. However, as soon as they leave Earth's orbit, they get attacked by recently escaped Conquest and his pals. Yeah, Conquest somehow survived despite being decapitated. 𝗕𝗲mites, I guess. Despite being outnumbered by the Coalition of Planets, Conquest and the other 𝗕𝗲mites put up a decent fight, and Conquest even blows a hole through Mark's stomach with his fist, before eventually getting choked to death by him. This is the point where we get to see how strong Mark truly became, as not only did he manage to actually kill Conquest, but he survived getting pretty much torn apart. It ultimately took him a few months to fully recover and regain consciousness. He wakes up just in time to save the Coalition of Planets from a devastating attack on their base of operations. After the base is successfully defended, the Coalition makes Mark a new suit that resembles his first one, and they prepare to launch one final attack on the 𝗕𝗲mites. In his current form, Mark is a powerhouse acknowledged by many, and even someone as strong as Conquest acknowledged his power. He's also very close to his father in terms of strength, which is a big improvement from when he was getting tossed around the Earth by him. At this point, Mark is even prepared to kill his enemies, which makes him much more dangerous than before. However, despite this, Mark's still not strong enough to face the leader of the 𝗕𝗲mites, 𝗕𝗲g, which was pretty evident in their encounter. Here, 𝗕𝗲g tanked multiple hits from an enraged Mark while suffering only minor scratches. In the end, 𝗕𝗲g brutally beats up both Mark and Nolan at the same time, proving just how much stronger he is than both of them. 𝗕𝗲g eventually decides to leave them alive, all in the name of reviving the 𝗕𝗲mite race. Knowing how angry the 𝗕𝗲mites might be after having their planet destroyed, Mark and Nolan race back to Earth in order to intercept them. After almost a full year of being away, they finally make it back and are surprised to find that the planet was completely untouched, despite the 𝗕𝗲mite presence in its vicinity. Surprisingly enough, 𝗕𝗲g offers Invincible and Omniman peace in exchange for the silent assimilation of the remaining 𝗕𝗲mites with people on Earth. Although this is not something Mark wanted, it's an offer he can't refuse, since he knows he has no chance against 𝗕𝗲g. At this point in the story, Mark is stronger than the majority of 𝗕𝗲mite warriors. He's a lot wiser now too, willing to give people chances and admit his own faults. His maturity is starting to fix problems, and he's even confident enough to leave someone like Cecil speechless now. He showed his incredible growth when he infiltrated the Pentagon and fought off all the other versions of himself without much effort, a feat he would have struggled with immensely mere months ago. And although Mark is now the strongest he has ever been, it's here that everything changes for the worse. Infected Mark. You see, there's this thing called the Scourge virus, which is pretty much a virus that makes 99.9% of 𝗕𝗲mites die if exposed. While arguing with Oliver if they should release the Scourge virus on the Earth, Mark accidentally gets exposed to it, which leads to him being put in intensive care. However, instead of dying, Mark miraculously survives, which we later learn is because of his bloodline. Mark is actually the grandson of 𝗷𝗲, who was the previous emperor of the 𝗕𝗲mite Empire. Although he survived the virus, Mark soon realizes that all isn't back to normal, as when he tries to punch Alan, his hand immediately shatters, making him realize that although he survived, his invulnerability is gone. This is Mark's lowest and weakest point, hence he spends most of his time trying to recover from his condition by staying away from any action. Invincible's mental state continues to deteriorate over time as he begins to feel vulnerable and powerless in the face of any adversity. However, this won't last for long, as he soon gets his power back in a rather interesting, totally not family-friendly way. Great time skip Mark. After returning from one of his missions, Mark finds out from Eve that he's going to be a father soon. Also, Mark's and Nolan's lineage as descendants of the previous emperor gets revealed to all 𝗕𝗲mites, and they choose Nolan to lead them instead of 𝗕𝗲g. This leads to 𝗕𝗲g being exiled and forbidden from ever coming back. This is also the first time in a while we see a direct comparison of Mark's and Nolan's strength when they arm wrestle. In this exact panel, we can clearly see that the match is at a standstill and that both of them are of equal strength, which is a big improvement from back then. After a brief stint with one of the 𝗲𝗲 twins yet again, Mark comes home to find Eve being threatened by his old foe 𝐿𝐵𝐴ngstrom. After 𝗕𝐵 manages to escape once again, Mark realizes that he can't continue going like this and that he needs to find 𝗕𝐵 and put an end to him once and for all. In order to do this, he decides to team up with his old teammate 𝗕𝗲, and they soon manage to pinpoint the dimension 𝗕𝐵 has escaped to. Upon their arrival, the duo realizes that Mark's doppelganger had already taken care of 𝗕𝐵 out of revenge for trapping him. However, before anything else can happen, 𝗕𝗲 activates a weapon that emits the sound frequency that can harm 𝗕𝗲𝗏mites, putting both Marks at risk. He then kills the evil Mark and betrays the real one, leaving him trapped in that dimension. This scene goes on to show that although at this point Mark is physically much stronger than many of his opponents, he still has a devastating weakness to certain sound frequencies, and he can be easily killed if he's not careful enough. After 𝗕𝗲's betrayal, Mark sets out to locate this dimension's version of 𝗕𝗲 in order to somehow get back to his world. After some explanation, he convinces this 𝗕𝗲 to construct a machine that can get him back. The plan works out fairly well, and after a few months, Mark successfully finds a way back to his reality. Mark makes his way to the Pentagon and informs 𝐶𝐶L about everything. However, as soon as they finish talking, 𝗕𝗲 winds up murdering 𝐶𝐶L and threatens to harm Eve in order to make Invincible submit to his whims. Thankfully, the duo manages to escape and make it to the space station where they seek help from the other 𝗕𝗲mites. While the world burns underneath him, Eve gives birth to Mark's daughter, 𝗕𝗲. The pair reconcile for a bit before Mark assumes his role as protector of Earth and confronts 𝗕𝗲 yet again. Under the Pentagon, 𝗕𝗲 easily overwhelms Invincible, and after a quick chat, Mark decides to surrender instead of instigating a bloodbath that he had no chance of winning, which leads us to retired Mark. Instead of teaming up with the other heroes in order to bring down the new world order 𝗕𝗲 built up, Mark and Eve decide to dedicate more time to their new family. They eventually decide to leave Earth behind and embrace a new lifestyle on the Coalition's planet, 𝗕𝗲, as officially retired heroes. As nice as it would be to close the book on this chapter of Mark's life and call it a day, Invincible is not through with his heroic duties just yet. Mark is asked to join a mission to intercept the old regent of the 𝗕𝗲 Empire, 𝗕𝗲. As soon as the chase began, Mark wandered into a cave on some random planet and found a being that sent him back in time. Yeah, pretty weird. Although this allowed Mark to save countless lives as he knew everything that was going to happen, in the end he chose to go back as he didn't care how many lives he saved if it meant he'd never see his daughter again. After returning to 𝗕𝗲, Mark realizes that 5 years have somehow passed and his daughter has already grown up. Before we cover Mark's absolutely strongest form in the entire story, let's first quickly cover post-time skip Mark. While the Grayson family is enjoying their vacation, 𝗕𝗲's half-Thraxan, half-𝗕𝗲mite children ambush them and try to kill everyone. Trying to protect his daughter, Mark attacks 𝗕𝗲, but even after everything he's been through, he's still no match for him, and 𝗕𝗲 easily defeats both Mark and Eve, leaving them to die. Thankfully, due to Eve's abilities, the duo was magically healed and Mark even gained a slight boost in strength. In this form, after his revival, Mark is a stronger version of himself by every metric. His body can tank more damage than before, and he's able to easily handle an entire army of half-Thraxan, half-𝗕𝗲mite warriors. Dealing with his past again and the myriad of other chaotic situations he went through hardened him into a ruthless warrior who doesn't hesitate one bit to kill his enemies. In the final battle against 𝗕𝗲 and his army, Mark fends off his attackers fairly well, whereas Nolan clearly struggles with 𝗕𝗲's impressive combat prowess. After unsuccessfully trying to intervene, Mark helplessly watches as his father gets split apart right in front of him. This interaction infuriates Invincible to no end, and to make matters worse, 𝗕𝗲 felt no shame when it came to using his offspring as meat shields to attack Mark. Unable to cope with the senseless loss of life, Mark flies 𝗕𝗲 into the sun to finish him once and for all. As they battle in the sun's core, Mark is able to hold his own surprisingly well against 𝗕𝗲, while both of them slowly burn to a crisp. With the help of 𝗕𝗲's armor, Mark reigns supreme as 𝗕𝗲 slowly disintegrates. Before he totally burns as well, Mark is saved by Alan, and despite literally being a burned husk at this point, he manages to fully regenerate, proving just how far his abilities evolved. Nolan dies shortly after due to his injuries, but not before making Mark the new emperor of the 𝗕𝗲mite Empire. Eventually, the 𝗕𝗲mites are forced to abandon Earth in order to keep the inhabitants of the planet safe, and Mark leads his forces on a mission to keep the peace across the universe. The 𝗕𝗲mite Emperor Mark. In the time that follows, Mark and his family work together to sustain order. Although we don't know exactly how many years have passed, Mark is clearly older now, and considering 𝗕𝗲mite's strength grows as they age, it's safe to say that Mark is way stronger than ever before. He proves it in his spar against Alan, whom he easily defeats. By the end of the story, according to Eve, Mark has surpassed his father in every way, and fulfills the wishes of the late king by reforming his people. He's the strongest, wisest, and kindest he could ever be, someone truly deserving of the title Invincible.